Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome from Seattle. My name is Brian Galicia. I lead our global ISV BizApps business here. And it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Tim from ZoomInfo. And I'll mention a little bit, you probably might have been expecting Henry, but Henry had a conflict. So we're going to have Tim be our guest of honor today. And Ray Smith, who is our general manager for dynamic sales in our R&D team. But before I do introductions, I wanted to kind of set the tone for these events that we do every Monday. So these ISV Connect live sessions we host every Monday at 8 o'clock. And the purpose really is to just have a conversation with our amazing Dynamics ecosystem, particularly with ISVs and new ones like ZoomInfo, who have recently published an amazing application in our marketplace. During this event, we encourage you to engage. So feel free in the LinkedIn feed. If you want to type in the window, and of course, we always start out every session with just where people are watching from. So if you just want to type in where you're watching from around the world, we'd love to hear that. And we'll give a quick shout out to all those people who are typing in the window to just acknowledge where you're watching from. But also, if there's content that is resonating with you, feel free to utilize one of the engagement icons in LinkedIn, the like, the support, the celebrate, whatever it is, to just engage in the content. And that gives us an indication that the information we're sharing is actually relevant. So if you're anything like Ray and I were just talking during the pre-show about the game yesterday, the Euro game, I'm more of a traditional US football fan, but I do watch soccer, and it was an amazing game. So for those of you watching, either if you're an English fan or an Italian fan, didn't really matter. It was just an amazing game yesterday. So hopefully everyone's recovering. But let's start with intros. So, Tim, we'll start with you. Why don't you give us a little bit of background of yourself? What do you do at ZoomInfo? And then, as we do with all our guests, if you could describe what's one thing not on your LinkedIn profile that you'd like to share with the people listening and watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. My name is Tim Strickland. I'm the Senior Vice President of Account Management and Channel at ZoomInfo, which means I lead all of our install-based sales organizations, and then the strategic partnerships, Brian and Ray, like the one that we just came out with for Microsoft Dynamics. So super excited to be here, really excited for the partnership. My background has been sales and customer success leadership for a variety of marketing and sales technology platforms. Prior to ZoomInfo, I led a sales organization at Marketo, which was acquired by Adobe, who's also a very large Microsoft partner. So know a lot about the Dynamics ecosystem, and again, super excited to be here. One thing not on my LinkedIn, that's a good one. I was born in a very small town called Thomasville, Georgia, which is about 15 minutes from the Florida border, which is known for roses and furniture. But now I live in the Bay Area with three small kids, Clayton, Kingsley, and Clark, who are 6, 4, and 1. So again, super excited to be here, and thanks for the opportunity, guys.
No, I appreciate it, Tim. Gosh, I've never been to Thomasville before. Now you got me piqued my interest. I'm like, I don't think I've heard of Thomasville furniture.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's is that related?
It is slightly related. Yes. That furniture gets manufactured elsewhere, but yes, also affiliated with Thomasville, Georgia.
Wow. Well, there you go. I learned something. Something new. The origin of the Thomasville furniture. Fantastic. Well, thanks, Tim, for joining. Yeah, so Ray, we'll do the same thing. Just from your side at Microsoft, what do you do in the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem, or specifically R&D, and what's one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile you'd like to share?
Cheers, thanks, Brian. So yeah, just to introduce myself, it's Ray Smith. I'm the GM for Dynamics 365 for sales. Relatively new to Microsoft, so I'm here about 18, 19 months, but I've been in the CRM space for near on 20 years. Go way back implementing with Accenture. Then I had a startup called Datahub where I was a CEO and co-founder. That was ultimately acquired by SAP. Really, came to Microsoft really because of a joined up vision to why I started the company almost like 10 years ago. So it's all around how data is disrupting the enterprise business application space and really how people work. And we'll come on to talk about that in a bit, which is really how do we give sellers the edge powered by data. So yeah, maybe something interesting from my LinkedIn. I was going to share that I'm a football nut. Obviously, I call it football. If I say soccer, my friends back home will beat me up for saying soccer. So big football fan. Played the sport for years. My friends will tell the story of how I was nicknamed the the Banshee of Belfield, which is more largely because I tore all the ligaments in my knee in one game, and my nickname became the Banshee of Belfield. Belfield was the soccer pitch that we were playing on. So so that's something interesting. So my friends will get a good laugh off that now. Me sharing this publicly on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think your team also within Microsoft now, in case they didn't know that might be your nickname internally. You might be
so the Banshee in Irish folklore is known for this very high-pitched wail, and that's pretty much why I was nicknamed it.
So what was the place you played? Were you a striker? Were you midfield? Were you a defensive? Were you actually goalie? Or like what was the position you took?
I was right back, and then as I kind of got probably less pace, I was moved into the middle of the park. But I remember once a halftime talk by a coach who was Robin Waters was his name, and he was from South Africa. And we came in at halftime, and he came in and he said to everyone, he says, "I want everyone to be more like Ray." So I puffed the chest, and I was like, "This is awesome. He's telling everyone to be more like me." And he said, "Look at Ray. He's got the touch of a baby elephant, but the heart of a lion. So be more like him. He may not have the skill, but he'll make up for it with the, the 2 tackles and flying around the pitch."
That's right. And wailing at the top of your lungs. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I got.
Great. No, well, thank you so much, Tim and Ray, for the great intro. So we'll just kind of kick off and drive directly into it. And again, as a reminder, we love to hear where you're watching from, or if you have any questions regarding the dialogue we're going to have with Tim or Ray, feel free to, again, utilize the LinkedIn experience, and in the comments window, just type it in, and we'll give it an opportunity during the event to actually ask those questions live. So Ray, we're going to start off with you and give us kind of your point of view. Of course, you are the leader within R&D for sales. What does that current stage look like across all the functions when you think about sales? And it's kind of apropos to Tim's background too, because when people think about sales, they just think, oh, it's just sales. Well, in actuality, it is the front end of the funnel, because marketing is just as important. Sales operations is just as important to the actual seller themselves. So where do you see that, and what do you see the gaps that exist in that process and that end-to-end experience today?
Yeah, I think CRM is going through a revolution in much the same way that seller processes and efficiency and ways we engage with customers is constantly evolving. Go way back, 15 years ago when I was implementing CRMs and walking the halls, and you'd hear whispers of, well, it's garbage in that system, and it was literally garbage in, garbage out, or my manager beats me up to put data into the system. It's so far away from that now. Like I remember a friend of mine, he came to me and said, "Can I ask for some career advice?" And I said, "Yeah, what's up?" He says, I'm not hitting my number. I said, "Oh, okay." And he says, "But I'm doing everything my manager asks me. He's asking me to enter all the data, keep it all up to date, put in quality notes." And I'm like, "But that doesn't help you close the sale in some ways, because it's taking you away from engaging the customers." So I would say we've gone through a number of evolutions, and then obviously the ISV ecosystem on top has been critical to unlocking more data, more intelligence, and more optimized workflows. And that's really, what we're about now at Dynamics, of those 3 layers of data is genuinely coming from everywhere. So how do you fuel that automatically into the system? And then the digital exhaust is almost there for the reporting needs, or to keep the manager abreast of what's going on the pipeline or the deals. But it really comes down to the next 2 layers, which is insight. There's so much data that you gotta unlock some actionable intelligence or actionable data, because let's be honest, we're not paying sellers to write database queries or drill up and down pages of data. So really taking out those highlights of something that's useful at the right time, at the right moment. And then if you think about that last layer, which is really just that workflow, again, if you expect sellers to have to go digging in the weeds for data or insight or ways to connect with customers, they've already failed. We want our sellers to be, I won't say coin operated, but we definitely want them to have that hunger to go sell and take the path of least resistance. But it's changing somewhat across those 3 layers around making sure we deliver an experience for customers. And being on the journey for them and being the trusted advisor and all these cliches that we've used over the last couple of years. But the tools and the processes and the data has to all support that. So I do think there's a constant evolution, but I think the biggest change and shift that I'm seeing is what we classify as digital selling. You know, go back a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, dare I say a couple of years ago. I was hoping to say a few months back, but no, we're literally, you know, coming up on over a year. And we would have said these class of tools were kind of resigned for inside sellers. Oh, it's for the SDRs only, it's for inside sellers. Now it's for everyone. And it's like, if you don't, you know, there was like the millennials who could do all this sales hacking and get data from here, there, and everywhere. Now we need the entire organization to be supercharged with data, intelligence unlocked, and then on a workflow that's just easy and delightful. In the same way, ordering, you know, doing online shopping or ordering a taxi these days, the same concepts have to be applied to the tools we give our sellers. So that's all about optimized workflows and workspaces for our sellers, whether they're going outbound prospecting, doing account nurture, and so on and so forth. So I do think a lot is changing, and I think the biggest one is the passive or automatic capture of useful information. So conversational intelligence. So for example, you know, with our tool, conversational intelligence, we could be having a meeting or a call. It would not only auto-transcribe, but it would take its sentiments, automatically pick up on actions, and would link that back to the CRM record. That's game changer stuff for sellers who used to say, I need my notepad and pen, I need to translate that back into the CRM afterwards, and so on. So I think the data is the key to unlocking value, which is important for both of us.
God, well said, Ray. I mean, I could totally relate because being a former seller myself and a field sales leader, that concept of we want that balance of data in and data out. And I always like to refer to as, is it in context to the information you're putting in that's going to help you do more when you're in that context? And so, Tim, we'll come to you. And what is your perspective? What has ZoomInfo and yourself seen in the challenges? I mean, many of the things that Ray has described is that ultimate challenge that everyone is faced with. If you have a selling org, how much data do you have your sellers put in? But that disruption, you don't want to impact that to where it's just busy work. You want actually to have sellers engage and sell with the right information to then have relevant conversations with the right people. So give us, you can give us your perspective and ZoomInfo's perspective. How do you fill that gap, and where does ZoomInfo fit into that equation that Ray had just done a great job of describing?
Yeah, Ray is right pretty much across all axes of what he just described. I mean, one, that when we think kind of pre-COVID and getting data in only a portion of the sales organization's hands versus the full organization's hands, he's dead on with that statement. I think we talk to sales organizations literally every minute of the day. And the biggest challenge is the garbage in, still garbage out mentality, which is, and by the way, Brian, just to answer one of the first questions that you posed, we at ZoomInfo try to have our sellers put in as little amount of data as possible, because to Ray's point, we want those people working on how to best engage their client, working through the sales process, qualifying leads, and then ultimately closing business. And if we can automate a lot of the data function and provide insights and serve those up at scale to not only them, but our operations and marketing businesses to drive inbound conversations to those folks, we get a lot more for our investment, and our sellers are happier with their work because they're doing the thing that we're paying them to do and that they're best at, right? So, but I think just going back just very briefly to how data and CRM intermingle, one of the challenges that we see is that these businesses make large investments in CRM, and then they have a lot of trouble getting their end users to adopt the technology, because people get in it and they look at the data and they say, hey, there's no real insights for me here. I'm going to go back to doing things the way I was doing it before because I know that it works, right? And so if, to Ray's point, a company like ZoomInfo can provide in real time company information inside a seller's territory regarding revenue or locations or employee count or investment theses or funding events or initiatives or any of those things that are going to allow that person to engage with the right prospects who are most likely to close now, then we can give businesses back a lot of time and we can make businesses a lot of money. And I think, Ray, having your sellers be coin operated, we're more than happy to do that as long as they can give those customers and prospects a really good experience along the way. And doing that with insights is how we enable our customers to do it and how we encourage our ZoomInfo sellers to do it as well.
Gosh, well said, Tim. I think it's that age-old question of buying signals. Like, if you have the right signal to know where to engage at the right time, at the right place, with the right content, you're farther ahead than everybody else, rather than the spray and pray of, hey, I have a list of 1,000 names. I'm just going to call 1,000 people and see which ones pop up. And you can still do that. Granted, there's a lot of companies that still operate that way, and that's not a bad way to go do it. But exactly your point, Tim, it is, if you put the right information in the hands of the seller to have them engage in the right places,
sure,
that's going to optimize and create much more value up front very early on in the process. So before I ask the next question, I'm going to get a quick, so John, thanks for calling that out, because I agree, like, this type of data is so important. So no matter what, like, everybody is a seller in a way, because you have to have that information at people's fingertips to consume, to then help, because it is a team sport. Selling in general, I know there are some exceptions to that, but selling is a team sport. It takes a lot of people, as we know at Microsoft and ZoomInfo, I'm sure the same way, to get involved to drive a deal from very early stages to actually to a closed signed contract. So I've heard the term in the past, digital transformation is a one-way door. So describe a little bit, Tim, because some people may have heard of that as well, that term, but what's your perspective on digital transformation being a one-way door?
Yeah, we talk about it in the business a lot. And actually, Ray, your experience at Accenture is an interesting kind of parallel to this, because when you mentioned that experience, you mentioned walking the halls, right? And there were, pre-COVID, there were a lot of businesses that were still in that model and it was effective. But it's only as effective as it allows you to engage with the right people at your target accounts and prospect accounts. And so I think as those businesses had to shift digitally in order to continue to connect with the companies and the people who they were selling to, those companies had to serve up insights to their field organizations in order for those conversations, Brian, to keep occurring, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what we found is that even as companies whose primary go-to-market model is one where you've got people walking the halls, they've now felt the ability to get real-time actionable insights about their target customers and prospects. And while they may go back to walking the halls, they still want to understand the digital footprint that's being left behind by these organizations who are in market for their solutions now, right? Mm-hmm. So I think as we think about digital transformation being a one-way door, I think you'll still see companies go back to doing things in many ways the way that they did it prior to the pandemic, but they're going to be doing it with a digital flair. And so I think ZoomInfo offers a lot of value there, and Dynamics CRM 365 offers a ton of value there, which is why we think the partnership is such a great one for us to invest in.
Yeah, and that's so well said, Tim, because you think about pre-pandemic and now during, and hopefully we're towards the tail end, it has changed a dramatic amount of disruption across the board and in sales as well, because the people who did not embrace digital, meaning that the days of actually having us meet people face to face, that's going to come back. Like, selling is relationship based. I truly still believe that. You cannot still sell doing everything. Well, we're forced to do it digitally, but it's going to come back to meeting people, shaking hands face to face. But to your point, that engagement of doing all those things digitally and what ZoomInfo can provide, that will still be such an amazing differentiator. And for those who adopt that type of intelligence, is going to be farther ahead because of the ability to take advantage of those data information and what you and Ray had described. That data insight and data intelligence is being so critical to how sellers move forward and engage in the process. So this goes back to you, Ray. So when you think about the trends that have catched momentum, and of course, when I think 18 months, I'm like, oh my gosh, it is like what you said. I'm like, oh, it's been like 18 months of being virtual, not meeting people face to face. So what does that look like in regards to the sales processes that you've observed and seen in just what we're faced with and what we've been faced with?
Yeah, I think a lot of the points we've already kind of covered, but just to kind of like highlight them a bit more. I think because we've all been kind of remote and isolated, we've all shifted to doing more digitally, whether it's in our consumer lives or indeed in the B2B. So interaction patterns and how we kind of our expectation of always on and kind of real-time delivery notifications, all of that has just become commonplace. I think to your point around Brian and Tim around how when the world goes back to normal, we continue to build that trust digitally and interactions. And I'm starting to feel like I'm getting used to I'm able to get more time with senior leaders if it's only a 30-minute block. Where if I have to fly to New York and then it's an hour and maybe try and convince them to go to dinner, that's a lot of time for that particular senior stakeholder. Whereas I can easily get 30 minutes. So I still think there will be a hybrid of the digital with maybe the kind of the final yard of building that trust or in a face-to-face fashion. But I do think, and to John's point earlier, I think the game has been changing for a while across the whole organization, sales, marketing, service. So more of a connected experience for the customer. It's more of the buyer's journey rather than the optimized sales process that organizations want to put out into the world. So I think what that's resulted in is key trends around collaboration, right? So collaboration, not just with the customer, but also internally. So you do get that unified front of, hey, this ticket has just popped in. I see you spoke to Jim last week. What's the story? We're trying to negotiate a deal. Or marketing sees that there's an active engagement before they, just kind of generate some campaign where they may disrupt something that the seller doesn't want. So all of this information is vital, and then it needs to have insights across the different personas across the organization. And then there needs to be tools like Teams that is unlocking the collaboration both internally and with the customers and with the partners, so that it's more real time, it's more efficient for the customer. And then ultimately it's that there's that digital exhaust of information that can be automatically attached or linked to records, so people aren't turning into data entry specialists and they're just focusing on the customers. So I think that's the biggest shift, is just more collaborative ways of engaging both customers and internal team, because it is a team sport. Everyone is a seller. And I would say also then just the productivity tools surrounding that and infused on the workflow is essential to just unlocking efficiency and delighting the customer. That's, I think, are the biggest changes.
Yeah, no, that's great insight, Ray, because I agree. It's like the touching point across the entire kind of process, but all the tools that people use, not just CRM, but things like collaboration, Teams usage, or communication tools, or whatever it may be, all those things coming together. So that's a good shift to kind of one of the last remaining questions is, when we shift from tactical to strategic use, how can the great business B2B intelligence that ZoomInfo provides, and then you take core customer engagement and core CRM with Dynamics 365, how do they work hand in hand in an enterprise grade approach to modernize the sales process? And this is a question to both of you, because that's the beauty, is that when you take data, the data can't just sit by itself. Data has to be part of the business process. And what better way for business processes to occur than a solution like Dynamics 365, because you're automating that business process from marketing to sales to customer service, etc., with data like ZoomInfo enhancing that process journey. So maybe a question for both of you is, how do you see that strategic usage working hand in hand together?
Yeah, I'll take it quickly, Ray, and then I'll turn it over to you for kind of the final thoughts. I think, Brian, you actually described a lot of it up front, right, in the question. But when we think about sort of the digital go-to-market, and Ray pointed a little bit of this out earlier, we think about sort of the insights as the foundational layer. as it relates to data, then the workflows sort of underneath the go-to-market systems that drive the automation and the scale, and then ultimately the engagement, right? So how are we as technology providers and ecosystem sponsors enabling that to happen so that our customers can have the right conversations with the right folks at the right time? That is how we're transforming, I think, us and Dynamics as partners, CRMs from systems of record, right, which they've traditionally been, to systems of insight. If you can provide systems of insight to the business, then you can provide value to the end user, and you'll have folks leveraging technology to drive real value, not only for themselves, but for the customer. And so I think as we think about, enterprise grade sort of deployments that get into account-based marketing and really sophisticated communications that drive demand at scale, like that's kind of the way that we think about it, Brian, with CRM as one of the hubs in that process, but also with other sort of technologies around that enable the engagement to happen at scale as well. So it's a very cool problem to solve. It's transformational in nature, and we're excited to solve it with Dynamics.
Love it. Ray, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's, as Tim touched on, data is key, and we need as much of that as possible to arm our sellers with the best edge that they can have to beat the competition in the market. For us, it's if we provide the workspace or the cockpit experience for sellers, and whether you're demand response or account nurture or a hunter who's chasing after opportunities, we provide with our sales accelerator a kind of a work queue, an optimized work queue that's prioritized based on all these data signals. And the more data we have in there, the smarter the AI can be to say, hey, this is the one that you should hit up next, or this is one that should trigger an automatic nurture. And then if there's another signal, then it will bounce back into the top of your queue. And then with the engagement mechanisms, then there's teams there for the embedded dialer that automatically, records, transcribes, automatically takes the actions. And through all of that, our sellers are just like, getting through leads or accounts and really driving efficiency and that engagement. I think from the customer standpoint, they just say that, you seem on top of it. You've got all the information at the fingertips, you know what you're talking about, rather than that feeling of, almost like a cold call. So I think it's helpful for the customers so that you're delighting them. It's definitely helpful for the sellers. They're far more efficient, far more armed with the information to be able to be effective in their roles. So I think the partnership is really exciting, and it's a vital part of our digital selling partnership.
Yeah. No, it's well said, Ray, because I've seen that as well with solutions like ZoomInfo. Providing that critical data insight is so valuable. So this is a good wrap up as we get closer to the end of this dialogue. So Tim, back to you. Share some examples. Like, of course, there's many, but if you can articulate just in the few minutes we have left, like what are some of the examples of the success we've seen together? Granted, this partnership is fairly early in the infancy of kind of the relationship, but the good news is like we've seen joint success, and so maybe you can articulate some of the joint success we've seen so far with a customer example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Brian, even though it's early, I think one of the reasons that ZoomInfo was so excited to continue to make the investment in the partnership was because we saw already 1,000 joint customers early before we were kind of going through this process. And so we were like, man, we have got to double and triple down here. But I think generally speaking, or more specific, in fact, the Miami Marlins, who's the Major League Baseball team in South Florida, leverages Dynamics CRM as well as ZoomInfo. And within 2 months of deploying the co-solution, was able to transform their go-to-market from very consumer-focused, right, to get people into the stands, to one where their sales organization was actually focused on driving value and monetizing through corporate events, season tickets, suites, and within 2 months of deploying the joint solution was able to drive 100,000 in net new revenue very quickly, which they can take and reinvest into the business in very many different and new, very cool ways. And so we're super excited that not only did that revenue hit quickly, but we have the operation or the ability as partners to work with that customer to drive more results for them over time, which I know, in fact, will expand the relationships for both of us. So we're super excited about the early success. And again, it's one of the reasons why we want to double and triple down on the relationship.
No, and thanks, Tim, for sharing that, because that is a great example. Is that when you think about a baseball team, and people don't think about that because they do sell. I mean, not just to us as consumers, but the B2B side, sponsorship sales, or you look in to go to a stadium, you don't think about it, but all those things that you see around the stadium, or to your point, the suites.
Yep.
That is typically done not by an individual, unless it's a birthday party or something, but that's done by an organization and a business.
Absolutely.
And those buying signals that you mentioned, Tim, are spot on, because then you can take that and move that into CRM is such a valuable piece. So to wrap it up, and thank you, Ray and Tim, it was such a great conversation. To wrap it up, how do people learn more, Tim? So if people want to learn more about the new partnership, about the ZoomInfo solution, what would be your recommendations on getting to learn more?
Yeah, check out the URL page.zoominfo.com/Microsoft. And it'll take you through all of the capabilities, all of the cool integration, which enables, again, Dynamics customers to in full have access to the entire ZoomInfo database inside Dynamics 365. So super excited about it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tim. And just to make it easier as well, we put the case study, we put the press release, we put the page that Tim was referencing in this hopefully easy to remember, aka.ms/LinkedIn Live JUL12. You want to click on that, that has all the links to the things that Tim had mentioned. So also want to give a quick comment, because this was really nice too. Rob Morse, we're now big Marlin fans at ZoomInfo. So thanks, Rob, for making that quick shout out. So that being said, I want to thank everybody watching live or watching the replay eventually for the time spent, but also in particular, thank you, Tim, ZoomInfo team, for this amazing partnership. I mean, we truly appreciate a new partner coming to the ecosystem, embracing the Microsoft Dynamics value proposition and how we can drive success jointly. And Ray, thank you so much for the great participation, again, the innovation that your teams are providing from an R&D perspective, because without the product, there wouldn't be any value that we can bring, and not just with our customers, but with partners like ZoomInfo. So Tim and Ray, any last minute comments you have before we wrap up the session today?
No. Thank you guys for the time. Again, I can't overstate how excited we are about the Dynamics partnership. There's going to be a lot of joint value for customers. And so the more we can talk about it and the more we can celebrate it, I think the more quickly those customers will get that value. So super excited for that.
Yeah, ditto, Tim. I think I'm excited for our customers with our kind of partnership here and the integrations we have. I've been really delighted to form this partnership, because it's going to make a huge impact to the customers, and really appreciate all the work together to date.
Great. No, thank you so much. And I did see someone ask a question. Can you drop that URL in the chat? So there it is, page.zoominfo.com/Microsoft, or that other link that I put in there for that. So thanks again, Tim. Thanks again, Ray. And be well, be safe. Looking forward to eventually this opening of where things can still be this virtual, but also that balance of actually meeting face-to-face and engaging that way. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great Monday. Have a great summer. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you.